Friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie Inglourious Basterds in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is Inglourious Basterds. So we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch Inglourious Basterds film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So let's start the video. Inglourious Basterds is a 2009 war film written and directed by Quentin Tarantino. It stars an ensemble cast including Brad Pitt, Christoph Waltz, Michael Fassbender, Eli Roth, Diane Kruger, Daniel Bruhl, Till Schweiger, and Melanie Laurent. The film tells an alternate history story of two converging plots to assassinate Nazi Germany's leadership at a Paris cinema. One through a British operation largely carried out by a team of Jewish-American soldiers, led by First Lieutenant Aldo Rain, Pitt, and another by French-Jewish cinema proprietor Shosanna Dreyfus, Laurent, who seeks to avenge her murdered family. Both are faced against Hans Landa, Waltz, an SS colonel with a fearsome reputation for hunting Jews. The title, but not the story, was inspired by Italian director Enzo G. Castellari's 1978 Euro-war film, The Inglourious Basterds, but deliberately misspelled as a Basquiat-esque touch. Tarantino wrote the script in 1998, but struggled with the ending and chose instead to direct the two-part film Kill Bill. After co-directing Death Proof in 2007, Tarantino returned to work on Inglourious Basterds. A co-production between the United States and Germany, the film began principal photography in October 2008 and was filmed in Germany and France with a $70 million production budget. Inglourious Basterds premiered on May 20, 2009 at the 62nd Cannes Film Festival and received a wide release in theaters in Germany on August 20th and in the United States on August 21st. The Weinstein Company distributed the film in the United States, while Universal Pictures handled international distribution. It was a commercial success, grossing $321.5 million worldwide, becoming Tarantino's highest-grossing film to that point, until it was surpassed by Django Unchained, 2012. The film received critical acclaim, with Waltz's performance as Hans Landa being singled out for praise, but some criticized the historical liberties taken. It also won multiple awards and nominations, among them 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay. For his role as Landa, Waltz won the Cannes Film Festival's Best Actor Award, as well as the BAFTA, Screen Actors Guild, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe, and Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Plot: in 1941, Austrian SS Standartenführer Hans Landa interrogates French dairy farmer Perrier Lapidite about a fugitive Jewish family, the Dreyfuses. Eventually realizing that a lie will not save him and his family, Lapidite tearfully admits that the Dreyfuses are hiding under his floor. Landa's men massacre the family, but one of them, young Shosanna, escapes unharmed. 3 years later, U.S. Army Lieutenant Aldo Rain recruits Jewish-American soldiers to the Bastards, a Black Ops commando unit tasked with instilling fear among Nazis in occupied France by killing and scalping them. The group includes Sergeant Donnie the Bear Jew Donowitz, Privates First Class Smithson Udovich, and Omar Ulmer, rogue German Sergeant Hugo Stiglitz, and Austrian-born translator Corporal Wilhelm Wicki. Rain leaves a swastika mark on all surviving German soldiers as a way to make their Nazi affiliations clear even after the war. In Paris, Shosanna operates a cinema under the name Emmanuel Mimieux and meets Frederick Soller, a famed German sniper set to star in the German propaganda film Stolz der Nation, Nation's Pride. Infatuated with Emmanuel, Zoller convinces Joseph Goebbels to hold the film's premiere at her cinema. Landa, as the premiere's head of security, interrogates Shosanna but does not reveal if he recognizes her. She plots with her Afro-French lover and projectionist Marcel to kill the German leaders by burning down the cinema with her collection of highly flammable nitrate films. British Commando Lieutenant Archie Hicox, a former film critic and fluent German speaker, is recruited for Operation Kino, an attack on the premiere with the Bastards. Disguised as German officers, Hicox, Stiglitz, and Wiki meet with German film star Brigitte von Hammersmark, an undercover Allied agent, in an occupied town at a tavern unexpectedly full of German soldiers. Hicox's unusual accent arouses suspicion from Wehrmacht Sergeant Wilhelm and SS Major Dieter Hellstrom. The major joins Hicox's group and informally interrogates them. Though Hicox and Hammersmark initially fool him, Hicox eventually blows the group's cover with a non-German hand gesture. A gunfight ensues, killing everyone except Wilhelm and a wounded von Hammersmark. While Wilhelm holds von Hammersmark at gunpoint, Rain arrives and negotiates for her release, giving her a chance to shoot Wilhelm with a dead soldier's gun. Believing she set his men up, Rain tortures von Hammersmark, but she convinces him of her loyalty and reveals that Hitler will be attending the premiere. She proposes that Rain, Donowitz, and Ulmer attend the premiere posing as Italian filmmakers, remarking that Germans do not recognize Italian accents. Landa investigates the tavern and finds von Hammersmark's shoe and a napkin with her signature. The Bastards infiltrate the premiere with timed explosives. Landa, who is fluent in Italian, readily sees through their cover and confronts von Hammersmark with her missing shoe before strangling her to death. He has Rain arrested along with Udovich, whom he has also detected, but leaves Ulmer and Donowitz in the theater. Recognizing the opportunity of his situation, Landa offers to let the attack proceed if Rain's OSS commanders will guarantee his safety after the war. Rain contacts his commanders and Landa negotiates a generous deal for himself and his radio operator. During the screening, Zoller slips away to the projection booth and berates Shosanna for rejecting his advances, leading them to shoot each other dead. As Nation's Pride reaches its climax, Shosanna's face appears on the screen, telling the Nazi audience that they are about to be killed by a Jew. Having locked the auditorium, Marcel ignites a pile of nitrate film behind the screen with his cigarette, setting the theater ablaze, killing himself in the process. Ulmer and Donowitz break into the opera box, gunning down Hitler and Goebbels before firing into the crowd until their explosives kill themselves and all the Nazis inside the cinema. Landa and his radio operator drive Rain and Udovich into Allied territory, where they surrender to Rain. Rain shoots the radio operator and triumphantly carves a swastika into Landa's forehead, declaring it to be his masterpiece. Cast: Brad Pitt as Lieutenant Aldo Rain, nicknamed Aldo the Apache due to his trademark of scalping Germans he defeats, is the battle-hardened commanding officer of the Bastards. Rain is a coal miner and bootlegger from the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, where he fought against the Ku Klux Klan. He survived a lynching and is a descendant of Jim Bridger and the Bridger family. He was a member of the Devil's Brigade, where he was trained in guerrilla warfare. Christoph Waltz as Standartenführer Hans Landa, an eloquent and cultured but deeply ruthless Austrian SS officer. Melanie Laurent as Shosanna Dreyfus, a 23-year-old French Jewish cinema owner whose family was murdered by Landa's men when she was 20 years old. Shosanna manages to escape due to luck, and Landa's decision to not pursue her. Most of the bride's attributes in Tarantino's Kill Bill come from Tarantino's original development of Shosanna for Inglourious Basterds, on which he started to work before Kill Bill. Originally, Shosanna, whom Tarantino described as a Jewish Joan of Arc, was an assassin who had a list of Germans she would cross off as she killed them. Tarantino later switched the character attributes over to the bride, and later redeveloped Shosanna into the version who appears in the film. Eli Roth as Sergeant Donnie Donowitz, also known as the Bear Jew, a brooding member and second in command of the Bastards who executes Germans with his baseball bat. In Tarantino's screenplay, Donowitz is likened to Joshua and his bat to the sword of Gideon. Roth channeled actor Tony Curtis for his portrayal per Tarantino's direction. Donnie is the father of Tarantino-created film producer Lee Donowitz, Saul Rubinek, who appeared in True Romance. Adam Sandler was originally given the part, but had to turn down the role due to scheduling issue with Judd Apatow's Funny People. Director Enzo G. Castellari also makes a cameo appearance in the film at the movie premiere. He previously cameoed as a German in his own The Inglourious Basterds and reprised the same role in this film, but under a different rank and SS organization. Bo Svensson, who starred in Castellari's The Inglourious Basterds, also has a small cameo in the film as a U.S. colonel in the nation's pride movie. Additionally, Samuel L. Jackson narrates the film, Harvey Keitel voices the Office of Strategic Services Commander, Bella B. appears as an usher, and Tarantino appears as an American soldier in Nation's Pride, and a scalped German two characters, Mrs. Himmelstein and Madame Ada Mimieux, played by Cloris Leachman and Maggie Cheung, respectively, were both cut from the final film due to length. Production. Development. Quentin Tarantino spent just over a decade creating the film's script because, as he told Charlie Rose in an interview, he became too precious about the page, meaning the story kept growing and expanding. Tarantino viewed the script as his masterpiece in the making, so felt it had to become the best thing he had ever written. He described an early premise of the film as his bunch of guys on a mission film, My Dirty Dozen, or Where Eagles Dare or Guns of Navarone kind of thing. By 2002, Tarantino found Inglourious Basterds to be a bigger film than planned, and saw that other directors were working on World War II, films Tarantino had produced 3 nearly finished scripts, proclaiming that it was some of the best writing I've ever done. But I couldn't come up with an ending. He moved on to direct the 2-part film Kill Bill, 2003-2004. After the completion of Kill Bill, Tarantino went back to his first storyline draft and considered making it a miniseries, but Luc Besson convinced him to finish it as a film. Instead, he trimmed the script, using his script for Pulp Fiction, 1994 as a guide to length. The revised premise focused on a group of soldiers who escape from their executions and embark on a mission to help the Allies. He described the men as not your normal hero types that are thrown into a big deal in the Second World War. Tarantino planned to begin production in 2005. In November 2004, he delayed production and instead took an acting role in Takashi Miike's Western film Sukiyaki Western Django, 2007. And intended to make a kung fu film entirely in Mandarin, this project floundered. He directed Death Proof, 2007, part of the double feature Grindhouse, before returning to work on Inglourious Basterds. The film's title was inspired by the English-language title of director Enzo G. Castellari's 1978 war film, The Inglourious Basterds. Tarantino has said that the film's opening scene, in which Landa interrogates the French dairy farmer, is his favorite thing he's ever written. Casting Tarantino originally sought Leonardo DiCaprio to be cast as Hans Landa, before deciding to have the character played by a native German-speaking actor. The role ultimately went to Austrian Christoph Waltz, who, according to Tarantino, gave me my movie as he feared the part was unplayable Brad Pitt. And Tarantino had wanted to work together for a number of years, but they were waiting for the right project. When Tarantino was halfway through the film's script, he sensed that Pitt was a strong possibility for the role of Aldo Raine. By the time he had finished writing, Tarantino thought Pitt would be terrific and called Pitt's agent to ask if he was available. Tarantino asked Adam Sandler to play the role of Donnie Donowitz, but Sandler declined due to schedule conflicts with the film Funny People, 2009. Eli Roth was cast in the role instead. Roth also directed the film within the film, Nation's Pride, which used 300 extras. The director also wanted to cast Simon Pegg in the film as Lt. Archie Highcox, but he was forced to drop out due to scheduling difficulties with The Adventures of Tintin, 2011. Irish-German actor Michael Fassbender began final negotiations to join the cast as Highcox in August 2008. Although he originally auditioned for the role of Landa B.J. Novak, was also cast in August 2008 as Private First Class Smithson Udovich, a New York-born soldier of slight build. Tarantino talked to actress Nastasia Kinski about playing the role of Bridget von Hammersmark, and even flew to Germany to meet her. But a deal could not be reached, and Tarantino cast Diane Kruger instead. Rod Taylor was effectively retired from acting and no longer had an agent, but came out of retirement when Tarantino offered him the role of Winston Churchill in the film. This would be Taylor's last appearance on film before his death, on January 7, 2015. In preparation for the role, Taylor watched dozens of DVDs with footage of Churchill in order to get the Prime Minister's posture, body language, and voice, including a lisp, correct. Taylor initially recommended British actor Albert Finney for the role during their conversation, but agreed to take the part because of Tarantino's passion. Mike Myers, a fan of Tarantino, had inquired about being in the film since Myers' parents had been in the British Armed Forces. In terms of the character's dialect, Myers felt that it was a version of received pronunciation meeting the officer class, but mostly an attitude of, I'm fed up with this war, and if this dude can end it, great because my country is in ruins. Tarantino met Melanie Laurent in 3 rounds, reading all the characters on the first round. On the second meeting, he shared the lines with her. The third was a face-to-face dinner. During the dinner, he told Laurent, "Do you know something? There's just something I don't like. It's that you're famous in your country, and I'm really wanting to discover somebody." Laurent replied, No, I'm not so famous." After 4 days, he called to finalize her for the role of Shosanna. Sam Levine was cast as PFC Hirschberg because, according to Levine, Tarantino was a big fan of Freaks and Geeks, which starred Levine filmmaker Tom Tykwer, who translated parts of the film's dialogue into German, recommended Daniel Bruhl to Tarantino, who recalled that upon seeing the actor's performance in Goodbye Lenin, 2003, he declared, "That's my Frederick Zoller right there. If Daniel's mother had never met Daniel's father, I don't know if we'd ever have the right Zoller." Isabelle Huppert was originally cast in the role of Madame Mimieux before being fired due to creative differences. It was also reported that Catherine Deneuve was considered for the role. According to French musician and actor Johnny Hallyday, Tarantino had originally written a role for him in the film. Filming, Tarantino teamed with the Weinstein Company to prepare what he planned to be his film for production. In July 2008, Tarantino and executive producers Harvey and Bob Weinstein set up an accelerated production schedule to be completed for release at the Cannes Film Festival in 2009, where the film would compete for the Palme d'Or. The Weinstein Company co-financed the film and distributed it in the United States, and signed a deal with Universal Pictures to finance the rest of the film and distribute it internationally. Germany and France were scheduled as filming locations, and principal photography started in October 2008 on location in Germany. Filming was scheduled to begin on October 13, 2008, and shooting started that week. Special effects were handled by KNB-EFX Group with Greg Nicotero, and much of the film was shot and edited in the Babelsberg studio in Potsdam, Germany, and in Bad Schandau, a small spa town near Germany's border with the Czech Republic. Roth said that they almost got incinerated during the theater fire scene, as they projected the fire would burn at 400 degrees, 752 degrees, but it instead burned at 200 degrees, 290 degrees. He said the swastika was not supposed to fall either, as it was fastened with steel cables, but the steel softened and snapped. On January 11, 2013, on the BBC's The Graham Norton Show, Tarantino said that for the scene where Kruger was strangled, he personally strangled the actress with his own bare hands, in one take, to aid authenticity. Following the film's screening at Cannes, Tarantino stated that he would be re-editing the film in June, before its ultimate theatrical release, allowing him time to finish assembling several scenes that were not completed in time for the hurried Cannes premiere. Music, main article Inglourious Basterds. Tarantino originally wanted Ennio Morricone to compose the film's soundtrack. Morricone was unable to because the film's sped-up production schedule conflicted with his scoring of Barria, 2009. However, Tarantino did use 8 tracks composed by Morricone in the film, with 4 of them included on the CD. The opening theme is taken from the pseudo-folk ballad The Green Leaves of Summer, which was composed by Dmitri Tiomkin and Paul Francis Webster for the opening of the 1960 film The Alamo. The soundtrack uses a variety of music genres, including spaghetti western and R&B. Prominent in the latter part of the film is David Bowie's theme from the 1982 film Cat People. The soundtrack, the first of Tarantino's not to include dialogue excerpts, was released on August 18, 2009. Released when the script's final draft was finished, it was leaked on the internet, and several Tarantino fan sites began posting reviews and excerpts from the script. The film's first full teaser trailer premiered on Entertainment Tonight on February 10, 2009, and was shown in U.S. theaters the following week attached to Friday the 13th. The trailer features excerpts of Lilt Aldo Rain talking to the bastards, informing them of the plan to ambush and kill, torture, and scalp unwitting German servicemen, intercut with various other scenes from the film. It also features the spaghetti western-esque terms, "Once upon a time in Nazi-occupied France," which was considered for the film's title, and "A bastard's work is never done," a line not spoken in the final film. The line occurs in the script during the Bear Jew's backstory. The film was released on August 19th, 2009 in the United Kingdom and France. 2 days earlier than the US release date of August 21st, 2009, it was released in Germany on August 20th, 2009. Some European cinemas, however, showed previews starting on August 15th. In Poland, the artwork on all advertisements and on DVD packaging is unchanged, but the title was translated non-literally to Bękarty Wojny, Bastards of War, so that Nazi iconography could stylize the letter O. Tarantino did not misspell the title to differentiate his film from the 1978 movie by the same name. He said it instead was a creative decision, which he initially refused to explain, simply saying that Bastards was spelled as such because that's just the way you say it. Promotion in Germany and Austria. Universal Pictures adjusted the film's publicity materials and website in Germany and Austria to comply with both countries' penal laws, as the display of Nazi iconography is restricted there. The swastika was removed from the typography of the title, and the steel helmet had a bullet hole in place of the Nazi symbol. The site's download section was also revised to exclude wallpaper downloads that openly feature the swastika. Though advertising posters and wallpapers may not show Nazi iconography, this restriction does not apply to works of art, according to German and Austrian law, so the film itself was not censored in either Germany or Austria. Home Media. The film was released on single-disc DVD and a 2-disc special edition DVD and Blu-ray disc on December 15, 2009, by Universal Studios Home Entertainment in the United States, 6 in Australia. It was released on DVD and Blu-ray disc on December 7, 2009 in the United Kingdom. On its first week of release, the film was number 2, only behind The Hangover, selling an estimated 1,381,220 DVDs, making $20,467,650 in the United States. The German version is 50 seconds longer than the American version. The scene in the tavern has been extended. Although in other countries the extended scene was released as a bonus feature, the German theatrical, DVD, and Blu-ray versions are the only ones to include the full scene. Reception. Box office. Inglourious Basterds grossed $120.5 million in the United States and Canada and $200.9 million in other territories for a worldwide gross $321.4 million against a production budget of $70 million. It became Tarantino's highest-grossing film, both in the US and worldwide, until Django Unchained in 2012. Opening in 3,165 screens, the film earned $14.3 million on the opening Friday of its North American release, on the way to an opening weekend gross of $38 million, giving Tarantino a personal best weekend opening and the #1 spot at the box office ahead of District 9. The film fell to number 2 in its second weekend, behind The Final Destination, with earnings of $20 million for a 10-day total of $73.8 million. Inglourious Basterds opened internationally at number 1 in 22 markets on 2,650 screens, making $27.49 million. First-place openings included France, taking in $6.09 million on 500 screens. The United Kingdom was not far behind, making $5.92 million, $3.8 million on 444 screens. Germany took in $420 million on 439 screens, and Australia with $2.56 million, a $2.8 million on 266 screens. Critical reception. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes reports that 89% of 332 critics have given the film a positive review, with a rating average of 7.8 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, "A classic Tarantino genre-blending thrill ride, Inglourious Basterds is violent, unrestrained, and thoroughly entertaining." Metacritic, which assigns a rating on reviews, gives the film a weighted average score of 69 out of 100 based on 36 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences surveyed by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale. Critics' initial reactions at the Cannes Film Festival were mixed. The film received an 8 to 11-minute standing ovation from critics after its first screening at Cannes, although Le Monde dismissed it, saying Tarantino gets lost in a fictional World War II. Despite this, Anne Thompson of Variety praised the film, but opined that it was not a masterpiece, claiming, "Inglourious Basterds is great fun to watch, but the movie isn't entirely engaging. You don't jump into the world of the film in a participatory way. You watch it from a distance, appreciating the references and the masterful mise en scène. This is a film that will benefit from a second viewing. Critic James Berardinelli gave the film his first 4-star review of 2009, stating, "With Inglourious Basterds, Quentin Tarantino has made his best movie since Pulp Fiction, and that it was one hell of an enjoyable ride." Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times also gave the film a 4-star review, writing that Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds is a big, bold, audacious war movie that will annoy some, startle others, and demonstrate once again that he's the real thing, a director of quixotic delights. Author and critic Daniel Mendelsohn was disturbed by the portrayal of Jewish American soldiers mimicking German atrocities done to European Jews, stating, "In Inglourious Basterds, Tarantino indulges this taste for vengeful violence by turning Jews into Nazis." Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian stated he was struck by how exasperatingly awful and transcendently disappointing it is, while praising Christoph Waltz's performance, a good actor new to American audiences. David Denby of The New Yorker dismissed the film with the following words: "The film is skillfully made, but it's too silly to be enjoyed, even as a joke. Tarantino has become an embarrassment. His virtuosity as a maker of images has been overwhelmed by his inanity as an idiot de la cinémathèque." Journalist Christopher Hitchens likened the experience of watching the film to sitting in the dark, having a great pot of warm piss emptied very slowly over your head. The film also met some criticism from the Jewish press. In Tablet, Liel Leibowitz criticizes the film as lacking moral depth. He argues that the power of film lies in its ability to impart knowledge and subtle understanding. But Inglourious Basterds serves more as an alternative to reality, a magical and Manichaean world where we needn't worry about the complexities of morality, where violence solves everything, and where the Third Reich is always just a film reel and a lit match away from cartoonish defeat. Anthony Frosch, writer for the online magazine Gallus Australis, has criticized the film for failing to develop its characters sufficiently, labeling the film enthralling but lacking in Jewish content. Daniel Mendelsohn was critical of the film's depiction of Jews and the overall revisionist history aspect of the film, writing, "Do you really want audiences cheering for a revenge that turns Jews into carbon copies of Nazis, that makes Jews into sickening perpetrators? I'm not so sure." Jonathan Rosenbaum equated the film to Holocaust denial, stating, "A film that didn't even entertain me past its opening sequence, and that profoundly bored me during the endlessly protracted build-up to a cellar shootout. It also gave me the sort of malaise that made me wonder periodically what it was, and is, about the film that seems morally akin to Holocaust denial, even though it proudly claims to be the opposite of that." When challenged on his opinion, Rosenbaum elaborated by stating, "For me, Inglourious Basterds makes the Holocaust harder, not easier to grasp as a historical reality, insofar as it becomes a movie convention, by which I mean a reality derived only from other movies. It loses its historical reality." Inglourious Basterds was later ranked number 62 on a BBC Critics poll of the greatest films since 2000. In 2010, the Independent Film and Television Alliance selected the film as one of the 30 most significant independent films of the last 30 years. In 2013, Games Radar Plus named Colonel Hans Landa one of the 50 creepiest movie psychopaths. In June 2025, the film ranked number 14 on the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century and number 11 on its Reader's Choice edition of the list. In July 2025, it ranked number 59 on Rolling Stone's list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century, accolades. Main article, list of accolades received by Inglourious Basterds. Christoph Waltz was singled out for Cannes honors, receiving the Best Actor award at the festival's end. Film critic Devin Ferrasi of ashoot.com stated, "The cry has been raised long before this review, but let me continue it. Christoph Waltz needs not an Oscar nomination, but rather an actual Oscar in his hands. He must have gold." The film received 4 Golden Globe Award nominations, including Best Motion Picture, Drama, and Best Supporting Actor for Waltz, who went on to win the award. The film also received 3 Screen Actors Guild Award nominations, and went on to win the awards for Best Cast and Best Supporting Actor, which was awarded to Waltz. The film was nominated for 6 BAFTA awards, including Best Director for Tarantino, winning only 1 award, Best Supporting Actor for Waltz. In February 2010, the film was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Waltz, and Best Original Screenplay. Waltz was awarded the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds is a big, bold, audacious war movie that will annoy some, startle others, and demonstrate once again that he's the real thing, a director of quixotic delights. For starters, and at this late stage after the premiere in May at Cannes, I don't believe I'm spoiling anything. He provides World War II with a much-needed alternative ending. For once, the bastards get what's coming to them. From the title, ripped off from a 1978 B-movie, to the Western sound of the Ennio Morricone opening music to the key location, a movie theater, the film embeds Tarantino's love of the movies. The deep, rich colors of 35mm film provide tactile pleasure. A character at the beginning and end, not seen in between, brings the story full circle. The bastards themselves, savage fighters dropped behind Nazi lines, are an unmistakable nod to the Dirty Dozen. And above all, there are three iconic characters, drawn broadly and with love: the hero, the Nazi, and the girl. These three, played by Brad Pitt, Christoph Waltz, and Melanie Laurent, are seen with that Tarantino knack of taking a character and making it a character, definitive, larger than life, approaching satire in its intensity, but not quite as going that far. Let's say they feel bigger than most of the people we meet in movies. The story begins in Nazi-occupied France early in the war when the cruel, droll Nazi colors Hans Landa, Waltz, arrives at an isolated dairy farm where he believes the farmer, Denis Menochet, is hiding Jews. He's right, and a young woman named Shosanna, Melanie Laurent, flees into the woods. It is for this scene and his performance throughout the movie that Christoph Waltz deserves an Oscar nomination to go with his Best Actor award from Cannes. He creates a character unlike any Nazi, indeed anyone at all, and I've seen in a movie. Evil, sardonic, ironic, mannered, absurd. The hero is Brad Pitt, as Lieutenant Aldo Raine, leader of the Bastards. Tarantino probably wants us to hear Aldo Ray, star of countless war films and B-pictures. Raine is played by Pitt as a broad caricature of a hard-talking Southern boy who wants each of his men to bring him 100 Nazi scalps. For years, his band improbably survives in France and massacres Nazis, and can turn out in formal evening wear at a moment's notice. Pitt's version of Italian is worthy of a Marx brother. The girl is Shosanna, played by Laurent as a curvy siren with red lipstick, and at the film's end, a slinky red dress. Tarantino photographs her with the absorption of a fetishist, with close-ups of shoes, lips, a facial veil, and details of body and dress. You can't tell me he hasn't seen the work of the Scottish artist Jack Vetriano and his noir paintings of the cigarette-smoking ladies in red. Shosanna calculatingly flirts with Frederick Soler, Daniel Bruhl, a Nazi war hero and now movie star. He persuades Joseph Goebbels to hold the premiere of his new war film in her theater. This sets up a plot that includes Tarantino breaking several rules in order to provide documentary footage about how flammable nitrate film prints are. A Tarantino film resists categorization. Inglourious Basterds is no more about war than Pulp Fiction is about. What the hell is it about? Of course, nothing in the movie is possible except that it's so bloody entertaining. His actors don't chew the scenery, but they lick it. He's a master at bringing performances as far as they can go toward iconographic exaggeration. After I saw Inglourious Basterds at Cannes, although I was writing a daily blog, I resisted giving an immediate opinion about it. I knew Tarantino had made a considerable film, but I wanted it to settle and to see it again. I'm glad I did. Like a lot of real movies, you relish it more the next time. Immediately after Pulp Fiction played at Cannes, QT asked me what I thought. It's either the best film of the year or the worst film, I said. I hardly knew what the hell had happened to me. The answer was the best film. Tarantino films have a way of growing on you. It's not enough to see them once. Quentin Tarantino is having what Martin Amis readers might call a yellow dog moment, something which happens when, following a worrying mid to late period of creative uncertainty, a once dazzlingly exciting artist suddenly and catastrophically belly flops to the dismay of his admirers. His new film is a COD's Second World War adventure about a Jewish-American revenge squad sent into occupied France to spread terror among Nazis. Brad Pitt plays their leader, Aldo Raine, and Eli Roth, the director of Hostel, is his ferocious second-in-command, Sergeant Donnie Donowitz. Diane Kruger plays a German movie star called Bridget von Hammersmark, who has secret quasi-Dietrich sympathies with the Allies. And Michael Fassbender plays Little Archie Highcox, a cucumber-cool British commando who in Civvy Street was, of all things, a film critic. Melanie Laurent plays Shosanna Dreyfus, a beautiful young Jewish woman who has had to change what in France is a resonant surname. She owns the Parisian cinema at which the Nazi top brass, including the Führer himself, will assemble for one of Goebbels's propaganda movies. Here is where the Bastards hope to make their hit. But opposing them is the chilling SS Colonel Hans Landa, nicely played by Tarantino's personal casting discovery Christoph Waltz, who won the Best Actor award at Cannes for this performance. It is notionally inspired by a 1970s B-movie called Quel Maledetto Treno Blindato, otherwise The Damned Armored Train, renamed Inglourious Basterds for its American release. A war picture in the Dirty Dozen style by Italian director Enzo Castellari. But Tarantino's debt is much more obviously to Sergio Leone, weirdly mulched in with Mel Brooks. Having seen it once in Cannes earlier this year and again for its UK release, I was struck afresh by how exasperatingly awful and transcendentally disappointing it is. A colossal, complacent, long-winded dud, a gigantic 2.5-hour anticlimax, like a Quentin Tarantino film in form and mannerism, but with the crucial element of genius mysteriously amputated. Overstretched scene follows overstretched scene in plonkingly conventional narrative order, and each is stuffed with dull dialogue which made it feel like Mogadon was somehow being pumped into the cinema's air conditioning. The cut is now marginally different from that which premiered in Cannes. Slightly longer, in fact, and there appears to be a new introduction to the unendurably, unbelievably tedious scene set in a beer cellar where the actors play a guessing game with playing cards. There's no doubt that the 52-year-old Waltz, an Austrian-born actor who had been plying his trade on TV until Tarantino plucked him from the ranks, is a real find, and Melanie Laurent also deserves this leg up to stardom. But they can't make any real difference, and Brad Pitt gives the most wooden and charmless performance of his life. He acts and speaks as if the lower half of his face is set in concrete. Now, it is misleading to complain about boredom when we all know how Tarantino can alchemize this into something special. In Pulp Fiction, two hitmen famously put the exciting business of murder on hold while they discussed dull things like what Europeans call a quarter-pounder. But there the ostensible banality was sexy, funny, and above all intentional, and the director could in any case turn the action on a sixpence into something thrilling or horrifying whenever and wherever he felt like it. He exemplified Don DeLillo's maxim about America being the only country in the world with funny violence. But here the boringness is just boring, and the violence doesn't get gasps of shock, just winces of bafflement and distaste, and boredom. Tarantino just seems to have lost his cool, lost his mojo. When I saw Inglourious Basterds at Cannes, my traumatized complaint was that it fails as conventional war movie, as genre spoof, as trash, and as pulp. Since then, its defenders have claimed that the point of the film is that it is kosher porn, an over-the-top revenge fantasy for Jews. Well, maybe. But it might simply have the highly unporny effect of reminding us what actually happened. And if kosher porn was the point, wouldn't it have been better to make the Bastards leader actually Jewish? Instead of which, their CO is Brad Pitt, the good old boy from Tennessee, a part of the world in which progressive sympathies with European Jewry are, how can I put it, atypical. Even this, moreover, isn't exactly the point. Wildly bad taste ahistorical fantasies about Nazi Germany are great, but here they are nullified by middlebrow good taste cinephile stuff referencing UFA, Emil Jannings, etc., in which the details, of course, have to be exactly right. Tarantino's genius always lay for me in his audacious and provocative adventures in style, making generic textures bubble and react. His great riffs were sublime, similar to what Goddard saw in Nicholas Ray. Pure cinema. What happens when these surfaces fail to fizz? You get what you have here. Great heavy lumps of nothing. I have always deprecated the growing and rather supercilious critical consensus that the master's best film is Jackie Brown. A good film, yes, but uncharacteristic, and without the brash inspiration of Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, or the late flowering delirium of Kill Bill. Yet maybe this is the sort of thing that Tarantino should now work on. Solid adaptations to steady and resettle his greatness. It wasn't until a moment of clarity in 2008 that he sat down, hammered out the final version, and declared it was time to make the movie. From the beginning, the title confused people. The misspelled words, Inglourious and Busted, weren't errors. Tarantino deliberately chose that odd spelling and never gave a straight answer as to why. Some believed it was an homage to an older 1978 war film with a similar title. Others said it was just his way of putting a stamp on it. He didn't correct anyone. In fact, when asked about it, he'd often say the title spelled that way just felt right. That was his answer, and he never changed it. When casting began, the biggest obstacle was the character of Hans Lander. Tarantino described him as one of the best villains he'd ever written, but also the hardest to cast. He needed someone who could fluently speak German, French, English, and later Italian, all while bringing a balance of charm and menace. For a while, he thought the character might be unplayable. He considered rewriting the role entirely in English just to get someone like Leonardo DiCaprio. But then Christoph Waltz walked into the audition room and changed everything. Waltz wasn't a household name at the time, but he left everyone stunned. His performance during the audition was so sharp, so precise that Tarantino later said, "Waltz gave me my movie back. Without him, the film might never have been made." The casting was a stroke of genius, and Waltz would go on to win an Academy Award for the role. There were other surprises during casting too. The role of Donnie Donowitz, also known as the Bear Jew, was originally written for Adam Sandler. Yes, that Adam Sandler. Tarantino and Sandler were friends, and the part was tailor-made for him, a loud baseball bat-wielding American out for blood. But Sandler had a scheduling conflict with another film. So the role went to Eli Roth, who also directed the fictional Nazi propaganda movie Inside the Movie. Roth brought his own quirks to the role. To get into character, he said he'd blast violent metal music in his headphones. But once, just before filming a brutal scene, he discovered that his girlfriend had secretly added a Hannah Montana song to his playlist. The bizarre contrast actually worked, helping him get into the unpredictable, wild energy of Donnie. Michael F. Bender's character, the British lieutenant undercover as a German officer, nearly didn't exist in the film. Tarantino had previously turned down F. Bender for the role of Lander, thinking he wasn't quite right. But when the opportunity came to cast a new role, a suave, educated German-speaking British spy, Fast Bender came back, nailed the accent, and landed one of the most memorable moments in the film. Then there was Diane Kruger, playing the German actress and double agent. Tarantino didn't believe she could pull it off at first. He assumed she'd be too glamorous, too polished. So she flew herself out to the audition and proved him wrong. He cast her immediately, and in one of the most intense scenes, her death by strangulation. It was actually Tarantino's own hands around her neck. He believed no one else could deliver the shot the way he imagined it. She trusted him completely. The scene was shot in one take. One of the strangest and most frightening production stories happened during the filming of The Theater Fire. That scene where the cinema goes up in flames was meant to be big but safe. The set was designed to burn in a controlled way, but once the fire started, it raged much hotter than expected. The steel support beams holding up parts of the structure began to bend. A giant swastika decoration fell from the ceiling, and Roth and actor Omar Doomed narrowly escaped injury. Tarantino refused to yell cut until he had what he needed. Everyone walked away shaken but safe. That wasn't the only time reality crept too close to danger. The opening farmhouse scene, tense, quiet, and unforgettable, was filmed using long, uninterrupted takes. Tarantino didn't want to break the rhythm, so the camera rolled for 15-minute stretches again and again until it was perfect. When the film reel finally ran out, everyone exhaled. The atmosphere on set after that take was electric. One of the producers said it was the moment they knew they had something special. Language plays a massive role in the film, and Tarantino used it with purpose. German, French, English, and Italian all appear, and language becomes a weapon as much as any gun or knife. One of the most telling examples is when a simple hand gesture, a way of showing the number 3, gives away a character's identity. To American audiences, it might seem insignificant, but in Europe, where fingers are counted differently, it's a dead giveaway. Tarantino built a major turning point on that tiny cultural difference. Another example of hidden meaning comes from the pipes. Hans Lander smokes a curved calabash pipe famously used by Sherlock Holmes. It's not an accident. Lander sees himself as a brilliant detective, always a step ahead, always in control. The prop choice was Tarantino's nod to that inflated ego. Then there's the music. Tarantino originally wanted Ennio Morricone to compose the entire score, but timing didn't work out. Instead, he included a David Bowie song from the early aughts. That unexpected mix gave the movie its strange, otherworldly rhythm. It felt like a war film, just not the kind anyone had ever seen before. Production took place primarily in Germany at Babelsberg Studios. It's one of the oldest film studios in the world. For the tavern scene alone, they spent weeks building, blocking, and rehearsing. Tarantino believed that scene was the heart of the film. Everything had to be just right. Pacing, tension, rhythm, and during editing, it stayed almost exactly as it had been. Shot? One unusual bit of preparation involved Melanie Laurent. Her character owns a cinema, so Tarantino insisted she learn how to be a real projectionist. For 10 days, she trained at the new Beverly Cinema in Los Angeles, threading film, changing reels, and running full screenings. She later said it gave her a real sense of connection to her character. Subtle references and cameos fill the film too. Enzo G.K. Steller, director of the original Italian war movie that inspired the title, has a small appearance. So does B. Svensson, who starred in that film. Even Tarantino shows up twice. He's the voice of a German soldier and also appears briefly as a scalped body in one of the bastard scenes. The fake Nazi propaganda film inside the movie Nation's Pride was directed by Eli Roth. He used different cameras and film stock to give it an authentic 1940s feel. It was a movie within a movie, a stylistic trick Tarantino loved. Every detail from the music to the editing was crafted to feel like a real piece of fascist cinema. Even the way the film was shot reflected Tarantino's love of old-school methods. He used real film, long takes, and practical effects wherever possible. Digital effects were kept to a minimum. Fireblood bullets or real. That choice gave the movie a gritty, textured feeling that sets it apart from modern war films. Some cast members got so deep into character that they brought it home with them. Christoph Waltz later said he avoided watching scenes of his own performance for months. He found it too unsettling. Brad Pitt, meanwhile, kept the thick Southern accent going even when cameras weren't rolling. Not for method acting reasons, just because he found it funny. The film's final scenes were altered during editing. Originally, there was more build-up to the explosive finale. But in post-production, Tarantino tightened it all up. He trusted the images to do the work. The final sequence plays almost like an opera, visual, violent, and grand. And finally, there's the way the film rewrites history. It's unapologetic, bold, and fantastical. Tarantino knew it would divide people, but he believed cinema had the power to change reality, at least on screen. That was the point. A cinema that literally destroys evil. A filmmaker who uses reels of nitrate film as weapons. A young woman avenging her family through light and fire. These aren't just facts from the production. They're glimpses into the kind of filmmaking that takes risks, breaks rules, and puts everything on the line. From fire hazards to language traps, casting twists to personal cameos. Every frame of the film is loaded with stories behind the story, and that's part of what makes it unforgettable. The story behind the making of this movie is almost as wild as what ends up on screen. Long before cameras rolled, before casting calls or costume fittings, the story lived as an idea in the mind of a filmmaker obsessed with cinema and history. He started writing the script in the late 1990s, scribbling notes and drafting scenes that never quite felt finished. For years, he kept returning to it only to abandon it again. The plot grew too big, the characters too unruly, the tone impossible to balance, so much so that he almost shelved it permanently. He even joked at one point that he might turn it into a novel, but something kept pulling him back. It wasn't until over a decade later when he finally discovered the right ending that the entire story clicked into place. With renewed confidence, he dove headfirst into making the film he had always wanted. The script, now sharpened and fully formed, was a sprawling mix of languages, genres, and revenge fantasies. It was risky, unpredictable, and in his eyes, perfect from the start. The film's title raised eyebrows. It featured two glaring misspellings that seemed either careless or intentional. Straight answer, he simply said it was how the title was meant to be. That's all. Some assumed it was an homage to an older Italian war movie. Others thought it was meant to stand out, but he refused to explain it in interviews. To him, the mystery was part of the fun. Art didn't always have to explain itself. Casting turned out to be just as complicated as the writing. The biggest hurdle was finding someone to play the villain. The character had to speak multiple languages: German, French, English, and later even Italian. He had to be elegant, disarming, and terrifying. The director described him as one of the best characters he'd ever written, and possibly the hardest to cast. At one point, he considered scrapping the entire movie because no one could get it right. Then, an Austrian actor, mostly unknown outside of Europe, came in to audition. As soon as he began reading lines, the room fell silent. He nailed the role instantly, switching between languages with terrifying ease, smiling and commanding the space like a wolf in a smoking jacket. It was a performance so chilling that the director reportedly said, "He gave me my equally strange backstories." The part of the baseball bat-wielding American who became one of the most iconic characters in the film was originally written for a famous comedian known more for silly voices than violence. He couldn't commit due to scheduling conflicts, so the role went to a horror filmmaker turned actor instead. To prepare, he wore scratchy 1940s wool underwear on set every day because he thought it would keep him in character. Oddly, before filming a particularly brutal scene, he heard a bubblegum pop song in his headphones that his girlfriend had snuck onto his playlist. Somehow, the absurdity of that moment helped him channel the exact kind of deranged energy the scene needed. Michael F.B. Pender, who would go on to give a standout performance as a suave British lieutenant, was nearly cast in another role entirely. He had auditioned to play the villain but was turned down. His German accent wasn't convincing enough, or so they thought. What the casting team didn't know was that F. Bender had grown up speaking fluent German. That language skill ended up landing him a different critical role, a character who needed to straddle cultures and identities as part of a high-stakes undercover mission. Diane Kruger's journey to her role wasn't smooth either. The director initially didn't believe she could pull off the part. She was too polished, too glamorous, too well-known for certain types of films. So she flew herself to the audition, determined to prove him wrong, and she did. Not only did she win the role, she later performed one of the most haunting scenes in the film, where her character is brutally killed without a stunt double. In fact, the hand scene, choking her on screen, or the director's own. He wanted the shot done a certain way and didn't trust anyone else to do it safely and precisely. The result was a moment so intense that it made some crew members. Terrifying incident on set involved the theater fire. That scene was supposed to be controlled and safe. The stunt team had carefully calculated how the flames would behave, but when the cameras rolled, the fire spread far faster and burned far hotter than expected. Steel supports began to warp and bend. At one point, a massive piece of the set, a swastika symbol, broke loose and came crashing down. The actors in the scene barely escaped injury. They were only seconds from disaster when the director yelled, "Cut!" It was a close call that no one forgot. Other scenes, while less dangerous, carried their own kind of intensity. The opening farmhouse sequence where the villain interrogates a French dairy farmer was shot in long, uninterrupted takes. The idea was to let the tension build organically. The camera rolled for up to 15 minutes at a time. There were no safety nets, no room for mistakes. Everyone on set knew they were capturing something special. When the final take was complete, the crew stood in stunned silence. They just filmed something that felt like it belonged in film history. Some of the film's most subtle moments came from cultural details that many viewers missed. In a pivotal tavern scene, a character uses the wrong hand gesture to indicate the number 3 while ordering drinks. In the US, most people use the index, middle, and ring finger. In Europe, it's thumb, index, and middle. That tiny slip, just a small difference in body language, reveals the character's true identity and leads to a deadly shootout. It's a powerful reminder of how even the smallest cultural detail can carry enormous weight. Other elements were buried in plain sight. The villain's pipe, a large, curved calabash, is a deliberate reference to Sherlock Holmes. He sees himself as a detective, smarter than everyone in the room, always 10 steps ahead. The music, too, was full of unexpected choices. The director originally wanted the legendary Ennio Morricone to compose the score, but the timing didn't work out. Instead, he assembled a soundtrack from bits and pieces of spaghetti westerns, old war movies, and even a David Bowie track from the 80s. The result was a score that felt both timeless and strangely out of time. Filming took place largely in Germany at a studio with a long cinematic history. The production team built entire sets from scratch: a rustic farmhouse, a smoky tavern, a lavish theater. Each space was designed with obsessive detail. The tavern scene alone took weeks to shoot. Lighting, dialogue blocking, it all had to be just right. The cast and crew rehearsed every movement until it felt like a dance. One unusual bit of preparation involved Melanie Lauren, who played the theater owner. Since her character operates a cinema, the director insisted she learn how to actually run a film projector. For 10 days, she worked behind the scenes at a real theater, learning how to thread reels and change film. It wasn't just a gimmick. That experience gave her performance a quiet authenticity that grounded her character in the real world. The movie also featured a fictional Nazi propaganda film within the film, directed by Eli Roth. To make it look authentic, they used vintage camera lenses, film stock from the 1940s, and editing techniques that mimicked the era. It wasn't enough for the film to just seem old. It had to feel like something pulled from another time. And it worked. Many viewers were unsettled by how real it all looked. Even the props had meaning. One German soldier is shown briefly reading a novel written by Karl May, an author adored by Hitler in real life. It's a chilling historical nod. In another scene, the camera lingers on a cigarette slowly burning in an ashtray. Nothing is said, but everything is felt. The director is known for these quiet moments of tension where silence does the storytelling. The film structure, tone, and final scenes went through changes during editing. After its debut at a major film festival, the director trimmed a few moments and added back a minute or so of footage for the wide release. The adjustments were minor, but they made the film tighter, more dangerous, more alive. And finally, one of the strangest facts of all, the director himself appears in the film. Not just once, but twice. He provides the voice of a soldier in one scene and also briefly appears as a corpse. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, but it's there. He also wrote the film's opening title, card by hand, refusing to let anyone else clean it up or typeset it. His scribbled, almost childish handwriting became the first image audiences saw. There's something fitting about that. The film, after all, is about bending history, twisting reality, and using cinema itself as a weapon. It's messy, bold, and deeply personal. Behind every scene is a strange story, a near disaster on set, an argument over a costume, a last-minute casting switch, a joke that almost ruined a take, a prop with hidden symbolism, a fire that burned hotter than expected. Together, they form a tapestry of chaos and creativity. The road to making this film wasn't short or easy or typical. Long before any actor stepped in front of a camera, the story had already lived a full life on paper. It was started years before, around the late 90s, abandoned, picked up again, rewritten, and nearly forgotten. But something about it kept pulling its creator back. Every time he made another movie, this unfinished project was sitting there staring at him. A war story, but not a traditional one. A film that would jump between languages, rewrite history, and carry the power of cinema into the battlefield. Once the script finally reached its complete form, the push to production happened fast. There was no time to waste. The goal was clear. Have it ready in time for that year's Cannes Film Festival? That gave them just over 6 months from finishing the script to a final cut. Most films take that long, just to cast. But this one was going to move differently. The first thing that stood out was how international the production would be. It wasn't just a story set in France or Germany. It needed actors from across Europe, scenes in multiple languages, and an environment that could authentically carry 1940s Europe without relying on sound stages and green screens. Shooting in Germany made sense. Not only did it have the landscapes and architecture, but it also had Babelsberg Studios, a legendary facility with a history that dates back to the silent film era. Babelsberg became home base for the production. A significant amount of filming was done right there on studio stages, but the team also built out detailed sets across real locations nearby. Over 30 different filming sites were used, each carefully selected or constructed to feel like it had existed for decades. There were old taverns that looked untouched since the war, dense forests that felt like they could swallow sound, and that now iconic Parisian cinema built from the ground up with careful attention to style and period detail. The art department was a small army. Hundreds of craftspeople, set designers, painters, and decorators worked around the clock, some of them coming off other major war films. But this one felt different. It wasn't just about getting the look right, it was about attitude. The film wasn't aiming for strict realism. It was going for an atmosphere that hovered just above it. That meant the design could bend toward pulp fiction, toward old westerns, toward comic books, and still feel grounded. So they made spaces that carried a sense of drama in the shadows and corners. The farmhouse in the opening sequence, for instance, was built to feel like both a warm family home and a place that could hold secrets. One of the most iconic sets, the Grand Cinema, was completely constructed on a soundstage. The exterior was built at a real location in Paris, but the interiors were done in Germany. And those interiors weren't just empty rooms dressed up with props. They were working environments. The projection booth used real film projectors from the 1940s. Those machines weren't replicas. They were museum pieces running actual film during shooting. The actress who played the cinema owner learned how to use them herself. She spent days in training, threading reels, and changing film. Because her character wasn't supposed to just know the motions, she was supposed to own that space. When it came to costume muming, the approach was equally detailed. The costume designer had worked on several large-scale historical films before, so she knew the value of research. But this time, the director gave her more freedom. Yes, the uniforms had to be accurate, but the characters, they could be stylized. Each outfit had to reflect the personality and mood of the person wearing it. The American soldiers, for instance, were costumed more like cowboys than soldiers. Their leather jackets and boots told you more about them than any line of dialogue. Meanwhile, the German characters often wore sleek, tailored clothes, intimidating in their precision. Casting was a global effort. The team searched across continents to find actors who could speak multiple languages, sometimes fluently switching mid-scene. And the film didn't just need one or two multilingual performers, it needed several. That meant finding talent that could not only act, but act convincingly in German, French, English, and Italian. The film structure depended on language as both a tool and a weapon. It exposed characters, trapped them, saved them. Getting those scenes right meant casting people who didn't just speak the words. They had to understand their weight. One of the most intense casting challenges was finding the right actor for the role of the cunning villain. He had to speak 4 languages, move between charm and menace in a heartbeat, and carry scenes with long, meandering dialogue. The character was written to be larger than life, and the fear during early editions was that he might be too large to cast. A few big names were considered, but none quite worked. Then a European actor walked into the room, and by the time he was finished, everyone knew they'd found the center of the film. In the director's words, "This man gave me my movie back. Without him, it might never have been made." On set, the energy was different from most films. The director had a specific way of working. He shot long takes, sometimes 5 to 10 minutes without a cut. That meant actors had to stay in character for extended periods. If one line stumbled or one move looked off, they'd reset and start over. But it created something real. It built tension you could feel in the room. The opening, scene with its slow, burning interrogation in a farmhouse, was rehearsed for days. Then they filmed it in massive, unbroken takes. No safety net, just pressure. The crew said it felt like theater. Every creak of a chair or pause in a breath carried weight. When they finally got the perfect take, no one clapped. No one spoke. They just stood there knowing they'd witnessed something special. There were funny moments too, especially with the cast of American soldiers. Some of the actors had worked with the director before and knew his love for odd specific detail, so they came in ready to play. One actor who ended up playing a bat-wielding character prepped for his scenes by wearing wool underwear from the 1940s, just to stay itchy and annoyed. That was his way into the role. Another actor said he had to spend weeks learning to speak Italian with a thick American accent, which was, during a late-night shoot, the fire scene in the cinema got dangerously out of control. The flames were supposed to be contained, but the heat rose quickly, far higher than anticipated. Lights warped. A metal structure collapsed and the actors were ordered to evacuate. Later, one of them admitted that staying another 15 seconds might have ended in disaster. It was a close call that left everyone shaken, but also reminded them just how real the stakes could feel. Post-production was its own beast. The editor had worked with the director on every one of his films up to that point, and she knew his rhythms. They didn't always edit traditionally. Some scenes were allowed to breathe longer than most studios would approve. Others cut quickly, skipping beats to keep tension up. Music was pulled from unexpected places, old westerns, forgotten film scores, and even pop songs from the 80s. The soundtrack didn't just support the film, it made it feel timeless. One little-known fact is how often the crew talked to the editor while shooting. Actors would shout, "Hi, Sally." After completing takes, knowing those moments might be reviewed back in the editing room, it became a kind of on-set tradition, a way to acknowledge her role in shaping the final product, even though she wasn't physically there. The film's visual style, too, was shaped by an old-school philosophy. The director insisted on shooting on 35mm of film, not digital. He believed film had a texture, a color depth, a richness that digital couldn't match. The cinematographer agreed. Together, they crafted a look that felt modern and classic all at once. Wide-angle lenses, slow dolly shots, and expressive lighting brought every frame to life. Dialogue was rehearsed relentlessly. For scenes with multiple languages, they didn't just practice the words. They rehearsed the pauses, the hesitations, the facial expressions that would sell the subtext. There was a scene where a character says just one wrong word and gives himself away. That moment was built over days of rehearsal. Everyone had to know exactly how it would land. In the end, the film wasn't just made, it was forged. In a matter of months, with a global cast, a multilingual script, a crew spread across several countries, and a director with an almost surgical vision, they pulled off something that looked effortless. But behind every frame was sweat, precision, and a few well-timed strokes of luck. Crew members later said it was one of the most demanding productions they'd ever worked on, but also one of the most satisfying. They weren't just making a movie. They were creating a story that would live in people's heads for years. A film that rewrote history, but more importantly, paid tribute to the power of storytelling itself. From the sound of film running through antique projectors to the crack of a baseball bat echoing in a forest to the sight of burning nitrate film lighting up a cinema, the movie was alive long before it hit the screen. And for those who helped bring it to life, the making of it became a story just as thrilling as the one they told. Long before any cameras rolled, the production buzz had already begun. The script, after lounging in the writer-director's drawer for over a decade, finally landed in his hands around mid-2008. Once it did, the urgency took over. Cast, crew, sets, costumes, and locations sprang to life in record time. He had promised K, and now there was no turning back. Within days, the project moved so fast that anyone familiar with normal Hollywood slogs could barely keep up. The decision to film in Germany was partly practical. Babelsberg Studios offered history and infrastructure, but also symbolic. There, in stages once tied to propaganda machinery, the team recreated rebel spaces, a French farmhouse, a smoky tavern, a cinematic palace. They built more than 30 locations and 20 major sets in about 10 weeks. That meant real-time pressure, but also a shared momentum. A lead carpentry foreman later joked they developed a wordless language. German crew, international department heads, they didn't need words anymore. Everyone just did what needed to be done. On day one, there was no trailer for the director. He wanted to be right in the mix, setting up shots as much as directing actors. A crew member named Checkpoint Charlie collected cell phones. If yours went off, you risked being bounced from set. The discipline was intentional. This was a film factory, nothing extraneous allowed. The tone that settled in was intense and focused. The cast arrived with stories already humming. Brad Pitt, who read the Script 2 days after it was finished later said the director had originally written that part for himself. He came to the south of France to meet Pitt over wine, and within hours the role was offered. They clicked instantly. Shared love for classic movies. Easy rapport. It set the tone. Actor and director meshed quickly, and that chemistry made everything else move smoother. By contrast, Christoph Waltz, the man cast as the villain, was kept distant. The idea was to preserve mystery until his first scene with others. No one had rehearsed with him. Yet somehow they were put in vans together en route to set. Riding silently for 45 minutes with his accent intact was unnerving, a built-in dread before every confrontation. Finally on set, when he opened his mouth, the results terrified them. Eli Roth, cast as the baseball bat-wielding sergeant, had his own relationship with the director. He'd been offered the role originally intended for Adam Sandler, but had turned it down. Roth was eager instead to pour his violent creativity into the character. On their first day of shooting together, long before theaters, burned or femme fatale revealed themselves, they shot a dozen setups in a day. Roth recalled using 2 cameras, one on him, one on another actor, just to cover ground fast. His first footage helped the director lock in Chapter 5 of the film structure. They called it a big thank you letter shot by Eli. The actress playing the cinema owner trained as a projectionist. She went to Tarantino's personal theater in Los Angeles and practiced handling film reels, threading projectors, even doing a surprise screening of her director's early film. And no one told her until she saw it playing. That genuine shock shows in her face in the final cut. She wasn't just acting, she was inhabiting a real-life skill on set. Costumes came together fast. The designer layered functionality with attitude. The American soldiers' outfits leaned more toward westerns than military garb. Thick boots, leather jackets, rolled-up sleeves, hats tilted to look half cowboy, half commando. On contrast, the German characters often wore sleek and immaculate suits that spoke of bureaucracy and menace. Stripes, cuffs, cufflinks, tailored cuts, they all whispered control. Set design had its own drama. The tavern interior took weeks to perfect. Blocking lighting, pacing, dialogue, all dialed in slowly. The glass of milk, whipped cream, cigarette flame, floorboard creaks, they became characters in the scene. The film's makeup artist later said the tavern felt alive. The echoes, the distance off-screen, everything mattered. Tension built as if the walls could strangle you. When it came to filming talk, heavy scenes, the director disliked monitors. Instead of watching playback, everyone performed into the empty stage and he set framing by eye. One actor noted how Tarantino was so tall he was always in the shot. You couldn't ignore him, but you never knew if he'd laugh a mid-take. He often did. Sometimes it ruined a perfect sound cue, but they only discovered it later during editing. The humor remained intact. The opening. Farmhouse scene was rehearsed for days. Each take could run 10 to 15 minutes long, uninterrupted. Actors stayed fully in the moment the entire time. When they finally got the take they needed and the film reel ran dry, no one moved. No applause, not a whisper. They just stood breathing. They knew they'd captured something real. Then came the fire. The theater set burned far hotter than expected. Actors Eli Roth and Omar Doom were inside when the heat soared. The steel rigging softened. A swastika prop came crashing down. Marshals had warned another 15 seconds would rip the whole structure. Roth later admitted they walked out minutes from disaster, but they'd stayed. The bravery and the grind that finish a shot at that cost became part of the law. Afterwards, Roth joked if he ever gets a scarred horror role, name again, he'd earned it. Editor Sally Manny, the only person in the room who had worked on every Tarantino film since. The early nines worked quickly. The first cut was over 3 hours. She trimmed it to 153 in 2 days, a feat no one expected. On set, actors would face the camera and say, "Hello, Sally," after takes as a tradition and tribute. By the end of shoots, "Hello, Sally" had become a ritual recognition that she would shape what viewers actually saw. Language was part of daily work. Scenes shifted between German, French, English, Italian. Actors had to juggle meaning, tone, acts of identification. Pauses, subtext, hesitation, slip-ups, all carefully rehearsed. In one iconic scene, a simple hand gesture betrays a character's identity. It's not the words, but the way number 3 is held. American finger order versus European that triggers suspicion. They practiced it until the timing was perfect. A tiny cultural slip became fatal. On one shoot day, an unexpected twist happened. Local French soldiers turned up near the set. Rather than postpone, the director recruited them into the scene, adjusting blocking to give more realism. The soldier extras didn't know all their lines, but their presence made the chaos feel lived in. It was a gamble, but paid off in authenticity. Daniel Bull, cast as a German sniper turned propaganda star at a memorable audition. He brought dinner, and at the end of the night, they got drunk and tried to intimidate the director into casting one another. He messed up scenes, switched between languages midline, even substituted Spanish for French words, something else that amused the director. By next morning, the part was his. The shared laughter and risk paid off. His awkward confidence made the character layered and believable. There were moments of real tenderness. During downtime, Tarantino often looped classic rock. Led Zeppelin, for one, just to set a vibe. He played it loud on location, and some crew members found it oddly energizing. He rarely relaxed, but music was one of the few times his guard dropped. Actors later said Tarantino's set felt both manic and oddly musical. The final scenes came together in editing suites across continents. Even after they premiered at Cannes, the film was later recut slightly before theatrical release. They trimmed parts of the tavern buildup and added a brief joke about Goebbels. It wasn't much, but it tightened the rhythm. It sharpened payoffs. That minute of dialogue made crowds laugh instead of squirm when the film premiered in New York at a Museum of Jewish Heritage screening. Survivors of the Holocaust stood and cheered. Tarantino later said he made it for himself, but hearing their response echoed the crew's commitment. The film was made by a group that believed in cinema's power to shift emotion, to replay history. On the premiere evening at a party, the cast mingled freely. Brad Pitt swapped film stories with Diane Kruger. Eli Roth laughed about the fire scene. Christoph Waltz stayed, measured in character enough to sound or steer even in conversation. But later he admitted he'd never felt safer filming a role. They had come together as colleagues and left with something deeper. In the months after release, cast members reconnected frequently, sharing pride and laughter. They'd lived in the cramped cinema set, slept on couches, rehearsed lines at odd hours. They cooked meals in village kitchens on cold nights. They'd build tension, tear each other down in rehearsal, patch things up over gin and tonic. That collaborative tension required respect, and they had plenty of it. Now, years later, those set stories live in memory. The night the tavern scene rolled through 9 takes until dawn. The constant hello, Sally echo. The panic when the swastika cable snapped. The surprise when French soldiers marched into a scene. The way Pitt's accent slowly became legend. The way Waltz's voice haunted empty corridors. They tell the story of a film crew operating at full intensity, fueled by cinema obsession and collective endurance. It wasn't glamour. It wasn't ease. It wasn't smooth. It was a bullpen of creative tension. Burn marks on props, laughter echoing under lights, language barriers smashed, fire marshal warnings ignored for the perfect take. And through it all, they made something unforgettable. Over 2,000 words later, it's clear that the making of the film was as dramatic, unexpected, and cinematic as the story it tells. Cast and crew talk now about that experience as life-changing. One of those rare films where every day on set pushed the story forward and pushed them further than they thought they could go. 100 small battles, a dozen close calls, a million shared moments, all ultimately forged the film you see on screen. From the very beginning, the tone tells you everything you need to know. This isn't a straightforward war film. It opens not with a date or a battlefield location, but with 5 words that cast a spell. Once upon a time, suddenly you're not in history. You're in a myth, a reimagining, a revenge tale where reality bends to emotion. And the tools of war aren't just bullets and guns, but also words in the literal sense, where the most infamous figure of the 20th century meets an end no textbook ever recorded. But in the thematic one, the story isn't trying to replicate events. It's trying to reframe them through fiction. It creates a kind of justice that the real world never delivered. The entire narrative is built around that, giving the oppressed a stage, a weapon, and a voice to speak louder than what history allowed. But it doesn't do that with speeches. It does it with silence, tension, fire, and film. The biggest ideas in the story don't announce themselves, they simmer beneath the surface. One of the clearest is the theme of revenge, but not the kind we often see in war films. This isn't about soldiers avenging fallen comrades on the battlefield. It's about victims reclaiming their agency. Shosanna, the young woman who survives a massacre, doesn't scream or plot aloud. She retreats, changes her name, and builds a life in plain sight of the people who destroyed hers. And then, when the moment comes, she doesn't charge in with a weapon. She carefully, methodically turns the tools of propaganda and image-making against the regime that used them so effectively. That's one of the most powerful ideas in the story. That cinema itself becomes a weapon, a literal one in the final scenes, but also a symbolic one. Throughout, the villains of the story are obsessed with film. They produce propaganda, they glorify violence through carefully curated national myths, and yet they walk into a trap set inside a movie theater, destroyed by the very illusions they worship. That twist turns the power structure upside down. It's no longer tanks and rifles that win the war, it's celluloid, light, projection. In fact, projection becomes its own kind of metaphor. The idea that film can cast not just light, but meaning, memory, justice shows Santa's face projected in smoke is more than a haunting image. It's the final word of someone who refused to be silenced. Her story and her face linger in the air even after death. The screen becomes her stage and she tells her truth in a way no quarter battlefield ever could. But that's just one layer. There's also the theme of performance, not just in the cinematic sense, but in how people survive. Nearly every major character is pretending to be something they're not. The bastard pose is Italians. The British officer disguises himself as a Nazi. Josanna hides her Jewish identity behind a French alias. Even the antagonist with his charm and politeness is performing constantly, projecting the image of civility while committing atrocities beneath the surface. This idea that identity is fluid and performance can save or doom you is central to the story. It's not just who you are, but how you appear, how you speak, how you blend in. One of the tensest scenes in the film revolves around a single hand gesture, a subtle difference in how Germans and Americans count on their fingers. That moment, so small, explodes everything. The message is clear. One misplaced detail, one crack in the performance, and your truth slips out. Language plays a big role in that. The film moves through German, French, English, and Italian, not just for realism, but to create a battlefield of words. Who understands what? Who's faking fluency? Who slips? Words become weapons, traps, and shields. The villain uses language like a scalpel, slicing through layers of identity to expose what lies beneath. Meanwhile, the heroes often stumble with language, their accents and grammar giving them away. It's a reversal of the usual power dynamic. Fluency becomes danger. Silence becomes survival. The film also explores nationalism and myth-making, particularly through the lens of cinema. The Nazi officers are shown as deeply invested in their own heroic image. They watch a film where a German sniper kills hundreds of enemies, clapping and cheering as if they're watching sports. It's a grotesque mirror of how any nation, even those claiming moral high ground, can use media to glorify violence and sanitize horror. But the film never lets you settle into comfort. It also turns the mirror on the American characters. The bastard, while charming and often funny, aren't clean-cut heroes. They torture, mutilate, and terrify. One of them is even nicknamed the Bear Jew. Their leader carves swastikas into the foreheads of prisoners, not out of necessity, but out of a desire for permanent shame. The question the film keeps circling is whether violence in the name of justice changes the person wielding it. Is it still justice when it looks so much like cruelty? The answer isn't given directly, but it's felt in the tone, in the silences after violence, in the way some characters look at each other without speaking. Josanna's face, in particular, holds so much emotion without words. Her smile isn't joyful. Her tears aren't weakness. She carries rage quietly, and when it's released, it's not triumphant, it's tragic. The fire she unleashes destroys her enemies, but it also consumes her. The film suggests that even justified revenge carries a cost. There's also rich religious and cultural symbolism, especially around fire and rebirth. Fire is used throughout as a symbol of both destruction and purification. It destroys the Nazi leadership, yes, but it also burns away the lies. The projection of truth through cinema becomes a cleansing flame. Even the nitrate film used as kindling has meaning. Old forgotten reels, once tools of storytelling, become tools of justice. Characters themselves are symbolic. Shosanna, for example, becomes a kind of ghost by the end. She seemed projected larger than life, her face glowing with purpose. Her body is gone, but her presence remains. The villain, on the other hand, survives, but is marked forever. That final carving in the forehead is more than a scar. It's a denial of anonymity, a refusal to let the villain hide once the war ends. In fact, that carving carries its own symbolism. It's the film's answer to what should be done with those who commit evil and then attempt to disappear into peace. A visual reminder that some histories cannot be erased, that some crimes demand not just punishment, but remembrance. Even the structure of the film reflects its themes. It's broken into chapters like a novel or like a history book. Each chapter centers around a confrontation, a clash of identity, power, or performance. The pace is patient, but never slow. It builds suspense through conversation, through glances, through pauses that feel like they could explode at any moment, and they often do. The director clearly leans into Western film tropes, too. The bastard are styled more like outlaws than soldiers. Their leader talks with a southern drawl. They ambush enemies, operate outside the military chain of command, and hand out. Don't fall in battle. They're consumed in flame or marked forever. It's not clean. It's not pretty. But it's poetic in its own brutal way. What makes the symbolism so powerful is that it's never over-explained. There's no character giving speeches about what the fire means, or what the projection represents. Instead, the film lets the visuals do the work. A cigarette smoldering on film reels. A face flickering in black and white across a smoky room. A scalped soldier looking up with horror. Every image is chosen with intent. Every moment layered with meaning. Even the setting of a movie theater as the climactic battlefield is symbolic. The place where stories are usually told becomes the place where real power is exercised. It suggests that the stories we tell and who gets to tell them are just as important as the wars we fight. That stories can be tools of oppression or liberation, depending on who holds the projector. Ultimately, the film isn't asking us to believe its version of events. It's asking us to think about why we believe any version of events. Why do some stories get remembered and others erased? Why do some heroes get monuments and others fade into rumor? The themes of memory, identity, and performance all feed into that question. When you watch the film, it quickly becomes clear that this is no ordinary war movie. Every frame, every sound, every cut carries intention and precision. It's a deeply crafted experience designed not only to tell a story, but to immerse you completely in the tension, the emotions, and the atmosphere of its world. The way it looks, sounds, and moves is the backbone of its power. From the very start, the director's distinct style announces itself. The opening sequence, set in a quiet farmhouse, far from the usual battlefield chaos, feels more like a suspense thriller than a typical war scene. This scene, in particular, is a masterclass in building tension through filmmaking technique. The camera lingers patiently, almost uncomfortably, as the characters converse. Long static shots hold your gaze, refusing to cut away. The quiet rustling of the countryside, the subtle shifts in light, the almost conversational cadence of the dialogue. Everything works together to create a pressure cooker atmosphere. It's a slow burn that makes the sudden violence all the more shocking and impactful. This approach to pacing carries throughout the film. Unlike many action-packed war movies that rely on rapid editing and fast-moving sequences, this film frequently lets scenes breathe. It often unfolds over extended takes that allow characters to interact naturally, while tension builds slowly, almost unbearably. The editing deliberately resists quick cuts, instead favoring longer shots where silence, glances, and pauses speak louder than words. This technique puts viewers in the same anxious space as the characters, waiting, watching, anticipating that something will break the surface. One of the standout filmmaking choices is the use of language and sound as a dramatic tool. The film switches fluidly among multiple languages, German, French, English, and Italian, depending on the scene and the characters involved. This multilingualism isn't just for authenticity, it creates layers of tension. Understanding who can speak what, who slips into an accent, and who hides something behind language becomes a game within the story. The subtle shifts in pronunciation, the clipped or broken words add depth to every interaction. Sound design plays a huge role too. Instead of constant background music, the film often opts for quiet ambient noises, footsteps on wooden floors, a match struck, breathing held tight in suspense. When music does come in, it's carefully chosen. Sometimes vintage European pop songs, other times dramatic orchestral pieces that build the stakes or add irony. Music and sound rarely overwhelm. They punctuate and underline, often highlighting the absurdity or cruelty of the scenes unfolding. Visually, the film is a feast for the eyes because of its deliberate cinematography. The director favors wide, symmetrical compositions that frame characters in precise, almost theatrical ways. The use of color is particularly striking. Deep reds, dark woods, shadowy interiors, each chosen to reflect mood and theme. For example, the recurring image of Shosanna in her red dress isn't just costume choice. It's a visual symbol of danger, passion, and revenge. The way light catches her in the theater, or the glow of fire, reflected on faces adds layers of meaning that go beyond dialogue. Camera. Movement is subtle but meaningful. In tense scenes, the camera often remains static, forcing viewers to focus on the character's expressions and dialogue. In moments of violence or chaos, it may whip around, creating a sense of disorientation or urgency. These shifts aren't random. They're carefully choreographed to guide the audience's emotional journey. The famous tavern scene, for instance, uses carefully framed shots and near silence to ratchet tension. The camera doesn't just watch, it participates in the suspense. One of the most iconic techniques used is the long dialogue scenes that build to explosive moments. The skill in these scenes lies not only in the actors' performances, but in how the director uses framing, pacing, and silence to create an almost unbearable suspense. The audience knows danger is lurking, and the extended uncut takes make you feel like you're trapped in the room with the characters. Each word, glance, or twitch feels loaded with consequence. The editing style is deliberate and often unconventional for a war film. Instead of cutting away from moments of violence quickly, the camera often lingers. This choice forces the viewer to confront the brutality head-on than allowing a quick escape. It's a method that emphasizes the weight of the violence, not glamorizing it, but making it raw and real. Another fascinating technical choice is how the film uses lighting and shadow. Many interior scenes are dimly lit, creating a chiaro effect reminiscent of film noir. Shadows often conceal half of a character's face or fill the corners of a room with darkness. This technique echoes the story's themes of hidden identities, secrets, and danger lurking just out of sight. The contrast between light and shadow becomes a visual metaphor for the dualities in the story, good and evil, truth and lies, performance and reality. The production design also deserves attention. The locations, sets, and props meticulously recreate wartime Europe, but with a slightly stylized edge that keeps the story hovering between reality and myth. The movie theater, where the climax unfolds, is both grand and claustrophobic, a stage for final reckoning. Costumes are historically inspired, but selected with symbolic colors and styles that reinforce character traits and themes. Sound and music combine powerfully in the climax, where a vintage French pop song plays over scenes of mounting tension. This ironic juxtaposition, the upbeat music against the brewing violence, heightens the sense of surrealism and dread. The use of popular music instead of a traditional score is a deliberate way to anchor the story, and success also owes much to its casting and performances. The director deliberately cast actors with distinct accents and backgrounds to enhance authenticity and highlight the film's themes of disguise and performance. The blend of languages and dialogue was natural and fluid, underscoring the story's cultural complexity. When it comes to box office, the film was a major success both commercially and critically. Produced on a budget of around $70 million, it earned over $320 million worldwide, proving that a film, with long dialogue scenes, multiple languages, and an unconventional narrative can connect with global audiences. Its blend of sharp wit, suspense, and stylized violence attracted viewers across many countries, especially in Europe and North America. The marketing leaned into the film's boldness, the unique spelling of its title, the tagline promising a brutal and unforgettable war story, and trailers that showcased both its humor and violence. Critics praised its fresh take on the war genre, its clever script, and its standout performances. Awards buzz, particularly for acting and screenplay, helped sustain its box office run and visibility. Behind the scenes, the production was an ambitious undertaking. Filming took place primarily in Germany and France, utilizing historic locations that added to the film's authenticity. The crew faced the challenge of creating a period piece that balanced gritty realism with the heightened style of a revenge fantasy. This meant painstaking attention to detail from props and costumes to set construction and lighting. Shooting long, uninterrupted scenes demanded intense focus from actors and crew. Cameras had to move precisely, lighting had to be perfect, and every take needed to maintain a rhythm that kept viewers engaged for minutes at a time without relief. This was a demanding process, but paid off in scenes that feel immediate and immersive. One of the most memorable production challenges was filming the climactic movie theater sequence. Coordinating dozens of extras, complicated fire effects, and the simultaneous unfolding of multiple storylines required detailed planning and careful safety measures. The use of practical effects, real fire, authentic, nitrate film lent the scene a visceral impact that computer-generated imagery couldn't replicate. A massive task. The director, known for his hands-on approach, worked closely with editors to shape a narrative that maintained suspense without overwhelming viewers with non-stop action. The rhythm of the film, when to pause, when to cut, was essential to its success. The final cut balances extended conversations with moments of sudden, brutal violence, creating a roller coaster of emotion that keeps audiences on edge. Sound mixing was equally crucial. Dialogue in multiple languages had to be clear and balanced, while ambient noise and music had to complement the story without overpowering it. The use of silence became a tool in itself. Moments where no sound breaks the tension, forcing viewers to lean in and anticipate what might come next. Cinematographers worked with natural and artificial light to craft scenes that feel both timeless and immediate. The choice of lenses and camera angles reflects a careful balance between classic cinema influences and modern storytelling needs. The visual style pays homage to spaghetti westerns and film noir, but remains entirely unique. Overall, the film's production is a testament to how thoughtful film techniques can elevate a story. It doesn't rely on explosions or CGI extravaganzas alone, but uses craft to immerse you emotionally and intellectually. The careful use of sound, light, editing, and performance creates a world that feels alive, dangerous, and strangely poetic. This careful craftsmanship helped the film stand out, not just as a war story, but as a cinematic experience that challenges viewers. It invites you to listen closely, watch intently, and feel deeply.